Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm really excited to kind of have this conversation with you and share with you some information about anxiety and how we find that balance in life as caregivers as we're going through our caregiving journey. As we have more people I see joining the session, if you want to share your name and your caregiving situation, who you're caring for, or maybe what city you're in, or what you hope to learn from this workshop,
more passersby
uh,
got involved, this scene
would
became
really
more
love
chaotic.
that.
A report came in that a couple of teenagers had climbed up on top of a
The
nearby
other
bathroom.
thing that I need you to do is if you can mute yourselves until we get into the workshop part of the session, and then that way we won't hear any of your background noise or anything. But once we have our conversation about halfway through this session, then you can go ahead and unmute at that time. So, again, we're having a lot of people join us, but I think I'm going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time. This is the session or workshop on managing anxiety and protecting your well-being as a caregiver. And I'm Sherry Snelling. I'm a gerontologist and an author and also CEO of the Caregiving Club. And we do a lot of consulting for different organizations, particularly employers, and also a lot of content creation, whether it's news or self-help videos or a podcast and all kinds of different things. So getting started for today, the big, conundrum, I think, is anxiety. And it's something that many of us feel at different times during life. But when we become caregivers, it seems like it can be chronic in some situations. And the clinical definition of anxiety is basically where we not only feel anxious over things that are happening with our loved one or maybe things that are happening with our lives and how it's impacting, our lifestyles, but also we're anticipating, sorry, stress. And that's a real interesting one because what we're doing is we're in constant, fight or flight mode, that stress mode on what might be happening, because anxiety, of course, is a stress response in the body. And it is part of that sympathetic nervous system.
Going bad.
I'm sorry, can you please mute your mic?
Sherry, I think you just muted yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't need to mute myself. Anyway, so what we know is that almost 1 in 5, so about almost 20% of the American adults experience some kind of anxiety disorder. And that's about 40 million people. And as I mentioned, when we become caregivers, this kind of sense of anxiety becomes heightened because we are always anticipating the next shoe to drop, the next crisis, the next thing that we have to learn or, dress or whatever it is. And so it is kind of a constant. And there are different types of anxiety. So just for those of you who are more interested in this topic, we have what we call generalized anxiety disorder, or what we call GAD. We also have things like obsessive compulsive disorder, where everything has to be in certain, color codes or certain, organized in a certain way. We see a lot of that. Panic attacks are certainly part of anxiety. Agoraphobia, which is basically if you become afraid to even leave the house, it's a fear of what might happen. It's that anticipatory stress. And claustrophobia, that's another one where you're fearful of enclosed spaces. I know I have a couple of anxieties. One is I definitely do have claustrophobia. When I get on elevators, I start to get very anxious. And of course, I get all that stress response where you start to sweat, your heart, is beating a little bit faster. I also get anxiety in the form of vertigo. And that's if I'm in a very tall building and I go over to the window and look down, or if I'm driving over a bridge and I look down, I just immediately kind of go into an anxiety attack. So I've learned personally how to also kind of deal with some of these things. And hopefully we'll be able to give you some tips that might help you if you're experiencing this as well. So I wrote a book called Me Time Monday, and I did a whole lot of research and I took a look at a whole lot of studies. And one of the books that I read that I thought was fantastic, and some of you may be familiar with this already, but it was actually written back in the 1960s. And it was by a woman, Claire Weeks, who was a psychiatrist out of Australia. She was really the first person, and again, let's think about the context of the time frame. Back in the 60s, a lot of people weren't talking about their emotions. We weren't certainly as much in touch with, that kind of mental health, emotional health side of what we we're going through. So this was really a breakthrough book, and she has a really great formula I'm going to take you through in the next couple of slides. But if you're interested in her backstory, the left-hand side there is a book that was written about her and about the breakthrough that she made in helping people with, again, emotional distress, anxiety in particular. And, this really comes back to we are so much more in touch and educated now about the mind-body connection, but 60, 70 years ago, people really weren't even talking about this. Everything was a physical problem, not an emotional or a mental problem. And yet we know now that the emotional and mental side can actually trigger so much of some of the physical, whether it's fatigue or headaches or back pain, or nausea or, IBS or any of these other things that we feel can often be associated and triggered by our emotional health or our mental health. Now, what was interesting about Claire and why she wrote this book is she was misdiagnosed for decades. And again, this is a long time ago, but physicians kept telling her that, she had possibly tuberculosis or maybe an ulcer. Again, they were going to a physical problem. They weren't even paying attention to what her emotional health problem was until she met a World War I vet who had suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and he gave her his formula. So kind of she kind of got it from him, but he said, this is what has helped me, and it's not about what's going on in your body, really, it's what's going on in your brain, what's going on with your emotions. And so that essentially then became the Claire Weeks method for dealing with anxiety. So here it is. The first step, by the way, if any of you have actually heard of Claire Weeks, or if you even used this formula for addressing any anxiety you have, please let us know in the chat, because I'm always really fascinated if people are familiar with this and if you have found that this has helped you, or if there's other things that have helped you as well. It's always great to learn from each other. So one is face your fear. Well, this sounds pretty obvious, but in reality, when we go into anxiety modes, in a lot of ways, we're wanting to push it away. And it's not a denial necessary, but it's more like, oh, I just can't deal with this. And, I know what's going to happen, or I know something's going to be bad, or I don't want to take that phone call, or I don't want to do this, or whatever it is. And so what she's really saying is, erase all of those barriers and really embrace that fear, really even name it. What is it? What is it that you fear? Are you fearful that your loved one is progressing more aggressively in their dementia journey? Is it fear for your own health? Is it fear that they will die? All of these things are different, right? And they may be all the fears that you're feeling. But if you can identify the fear, that is the first step in really tackling then the anxiety. And it gives us something to focus on. And it also starts to turn the tide of, whenever we have anxiety, it's an external control over our emotional health, our balance in life, right? It's things that could happen or things that are happening that actually place us in that anxious mode. And we feel like we don't have any control. We've lost the control. And that is a fear factor. So the minute that we can start to take steps to take the control back is when we start to tame, that anxiety that we're facing. Now, step 2 is, okay, we've named the fear. Now we have to accept it. So one of the things that Weeks says is that you have to accept what's happening to you as you're experiencing anxiety. So we've said, okay, I'm anxious of my mom's dementia getting worse. It seems like it's rapidly escalating. This is scary. I'm not quite sure what to do here. But now I'm going to accept my fear, and I'm going to realize that maybe my headaches, or maybe my palms that are sweating, or maybe that back pain that I can't, seem to get rid of, or my insomnia is all based on this anxiety. And so I'm just going to accept it. I'm going to say this is a part of the steps to get through my anxiety. Okay, I get it. I'm having an anxiety attack because my palms are sweating, or I'm having a headache. And now I'm going to go into the next step, which is going to help me get beyond all these things. Again, whether it's the heart thumping in your ears, or maybe you're even dizzy or nauseous. My mom, who is in her 80s, has a different kind of anxiety from me. Mine are mostly based on environments. Like I said, I'm driving over a bridge, I have vertigo, or I'm in an elevator and I feel claustrophobic. My mom is very much of a anticipatory stress, and she's constantly worrying about what will happen, instead of just enjoying the moment or enjoying the day. And she gets dizzy, she gets nauseous, she has the heart palpitations. So both of us together have actually worked on this, in terms of trying to address the different kinds of anxiety that we have. And so this is the next step in kind of controlling that anxiety, is just accepting that you have the anxiety, you have the fear. But here's kind of my favorite step, which is called the floating step. It's step 3. And it's basically where you almost go into a meditation or a mindfulness of floating past your fear. Now, the way that Claire Weeks describes it in her book is to think of yourself like a leaf, and you're floating downstream in a lake or a river, or maybe you're drifting in the ocean, or, in the pool on an inner tube. Whatever your favorite body of water is, kind of take that and use it. But it's where you're literally placing yourself in an environment that does make you calmer, that maybe gives you joy. I love kind of the inner tube thing because we had inner tubes as kids. It brings me back to my childhood, and I can feel the calm of the water just kind of splashing around me, the sun on my face, maybe a little bit of breeze or whatever it is. So you kind of just place yourself into that moment that maybe you're taking from your memory, from your past, and then it's going to help you now get past the heart palpitations, the sweating palms, and all that. So you don't want to analyze your fear. You really just want to let it float away, because you've already said, here's my fear. Here are the things that I'm feeling that I know are now associated with my fear and my anxiety. How do I get past it? I'm going to float. So if you can get into a floating phase, what I love is Claire Weeks called this masterly inactivity, which I love. How to master your inactivity. But she said that this is a really important step. And again, everybody is personalizing this. It might take you, a couple minutes. It might take you 20 minutes to float. Whatever it does that gets you past to that calmer, sense is what we're really looking for here. And then finally, she said, again, let the time pass. Don't force yourself to do this in 1 minute. Give yourself the grace and the time to understand that it might take you a little bit longer. Maybe this particular anxiety attack is worse than others. That means we have to spend a little bit more time thinking about the floating, and getting to that point where we can finally bring our what we call homeostasis back, which in gerontology means balance. And it's really where we're taking the stress response of the sympathetic nervous system, and we've gone into stress response with the anxiety. And now what we've done is given ourselves time to relax and get back to the parasympathetic nervous system, which gets us back to that balance. So that's basically the Claire Weeks method, which I think, for me at least, I know it's really worked. Again, as I said, I'm going to try to, get into the chat. I know we have quite a few people joining us, but if you've done this yourself, or if there's other things that you've done, definitely let us know. Now, one other thing I wanted to share that is kind of related to Claire Weeks's 4 steps of getting to past anxiety is you've probably heard a lot, particularly in the media lately. There's been a lot of attention on the vagus nerve. And if you're not familiar with what the vagus nerve is, it is the longest nerve in our body. And as you can see from the little diagram there, it runs from the base of your neck, basically where your brain stem connects to your spinal cord. And it goes all the way down the back of your spine and to kind of the top of your bum, if you will. And it's basically ending about where your small intestines are internally. And so this is really the key player in what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, which is getting that body back into a calm homeostasis, a calm balance. And one of the ways, or really kind of what I've learned in all of the research I've done, and by the way, I know many of you probably do, meditation. There's so many different types, whether it's yoga, whether it's a visualization exercise, whether it's breathing exercise. There's so many different ways, of course, for us to help calm ourselves. But one of the things I found in all the research that I did, which was like 2 years of exhaustive research for all of this stuff, the 4-7-8 breathing technique, which you may have heard of, is actually the number one way to calm your vagus nerve. Now, there are other breathing techniques like the box breathing and other things that can be done that do help as well. But if you really want to get that vagus nerve calm, which is kind of the crux of our stress, where the stress is, whether it's, anxiety, just overall stress, whatever, it's the 4-7-8. So if you haven't heard of it, for those of you familiar with Dr. Andrew Weil, who I really love, he is the author of numerous wellness books, and he's also the founder of the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine at the University of Arizona. And he has a very, very fine reputation. This is his favorite breathing method. Sometimes it's also called the heart-focused breathing because it directs your attention to the heart area and breathing a little bit more deeply in that chest area than normal. And so what you do is you do 4 breaths in for 1 breath in for 4 seconds. Then you hold it for 7. And then you let it out slowly for 8. And the reason why this is better than, for instance, like a box breathing, which is, breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, that's more of a box breathing method, is because you are actually helping out the heart rate, and you're breathing more where particularly as you're exhaling, it's really helping the heart and also helping that vagus nerve to calm itself faster. And so if you repeat this 3 times in a day, it should help with any kind of anxiety or any stress response that you're having. But again, you have to give yourself the time to do it. Be in a calm place if you can. Don't check your phone in between the 3 times you do it or whatever it is. Those are kind of the things that we talk about. So those are kind of a couple of methods for dealing with anxiety in general, whatever it is that is giving us that fear. But we also wanted to talk in this workshop before we get into kind of our interactive conversation here. We wanted to talk about what are the things that we can do as caregivers. We talk so often about, we got to practice self-care. Oh, you should do this, you should do that. I mean, and let's face it, we all know a lot of this stuff. There's so much good information out there about your health and your wellness and all these types of things. But as caregivers, we have no time. So I get you on that one. It's like, oh yeah, great. Go to the gym or go walking even with a friend. I mean, even something as seems simple as that is tough, right? And so as caregivers, I'm always very mindful of things that you can do that you don't necessarily have to go somewhere. Now, there's a couple of things that we'll talk through, but you don't have to pay anything. I'm really big on that. And you also have to be able to do it in 7 minutes or less. That's kind of my mantra, because I do believe that even in the course of a crazy day, you can try to find those 7 minutes. And even if it's not on that day, then it's the next day we say, okay, you know what? I need a little me time. I need a little self-care. I got to find my 7 minutes. And when you say 7 minutes, there's something that kind of triggers the mind to think, okay, that's doable. I could tackle that. Or maybe even cut it in half, 3 minutes if you want to start, even lower, whatever it is. But it's kind of this thought of, I don't need to bite off a big chunk to practice self-care. I can make it small. And every little small step that I take where I'm, bringing myself that self-care moment is going to give me again back a sense of control. And that sense of control is also going to then help with maybe reducing your anxiety in other situations. Because the whole thing is really about fear of control. And it's the fear that we can't control dementia and we can't control what's happening with our loved one. It's the fear, as I said, again, of what's going on with ourselves or we're ignoring our own self-care. The minute you can take these baby steps to get a little tiny bit of self-control or what we call inner locus of control back, all of a sudden we become empowered. And now it's like, okay, you know what? I feel good. I did something for myself. I can keep tackling all these other things that are kind of challenges on my road here. So, how do you go from stressful to stress less, or at least, not as much stress? There's something called Hawanakwatsi. I don't know if many of you have heard of that term. It's actually a Hopi Indian language term, and it literally means a life out of balance. Now, Hawanakwatsi was actually a public health initiative in New Mexico that was originally designed to help get children off of Ritalin by bringing more nature into their life when they had all these anxieties, particularly with a lot of technology and all that. It eventually became a documentary that was done by Francis Ford Coppola, and Philip Glass did the music soundtrack. There's no talking, there's no actors really. It's all just scenery of what our world really looks like and what our brain is seeking. So let me give you an example. This is very familiar for anybody who lives in Los Angeles, like myself, or I live quite a little bit out of LA, but I still have to get on the freeways. This is a nighttime view of the lights and the traffic and all that kind of stuff. For those who may live in more of a city place like New York, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing lots of steel. Lots of windows, lots of lines, right? There's a grid here. And the tall buildings sometimes are obscuring us being able to even see the clouds, maybe even feel the sun on our face as we're walking down Fifth Avenue or Broadway or wherever we happen to be. And there's other ways that all the technology, as we know, is invading our life. And a good one, I think, is this picture, because I think many of us can associate with this, where maybe you go out to dinner with family or friends and everybody's on their phone. Nobody's really paying attention to each other. Everybody's just checking whatever their messages are, whatever. So what's about this is that our technology is here to stay. We don't want to say all technology is bad, because certainly it has a lot of really good qualities. The problem is a couple of things. Technology has made us have more anticipatory stress. And I say that because, again, we can be instantly connected now to any kind of problem there is, any crisis. And that's not to say that years ago, before all of smartphones and texting and all that, that we weren't necessarily connected to crises. It's just that now we anticipate it, particularly if we're caregivers, right? Your phone just rang, you just got a text or a chime or whatever, you just know it's something bad. So that's kind of just part of our world. The other thing is that in just our daily lives, okay, just all the lifestyle things that we have to do, we are in what we call a choice overload situation. And Alvin Toffler actually wrote about this years ago, and it was in a book called Future Shock. And he said, we are going to hit a moment in our society where there's too many choices, and now those choices will make us unhappy. And ultimately, they're going to make us unhealthy. And we're kind of there. So the whole, notion of this is, again, I'm not here to tell you you got to get rid of all your technology. We all hear about doing a digital detox, which is great. Putting your phone away for 20 minutes or even a weekend if you could get away with it. Now, caregivers have a harder time because we're a lifeline for our loved ones. So we do have to stay connected to a lot of different things that may be going on with our loved ones. But how do we bring that balance back into our lives? How do we feel less of this anticipatory stress, that the anxiety that could be, and also how does like this young group of people here, right? We are missing out on something called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin, I write in my book about the 4 hormones of happiness, and I did the workshop last year for CareCon on those 4 hormones of happiness. And, the one thing that we know is oxytocin is our love, trust, and bonding hormone. And we mostly get it when we're looking into someone's eyes and having a conversation. We're giving someone a hug or a handshake or a pat on the back. We're just near them. You can kind of feel the body heat, right? We're connecting in ways that are going back to our ancient brains that make us feel love, trust, and bonding. When we are looking at our phones, we're not getting oxytocin. And oxytocin is a hormone that is needed not just for happiness, quite frankly, for survival. So we have to start paying attention to how our brains work, how some of these hormones work that are so important for us in terms of our health and happiness. So this is really what our brains are seeking, okay? Our brains are just dying for nature. These are 2 nature scenes, and the first one, of course, is a beautiful pier with the blue ocean, the sunset. Now, the Earth is fascinating to me because if you go back to what I just showed you, where the freeway lights and the grid lines in the buildings, in a cityscape or whatever, and the metal, you see none of that from this NASA photograph of the Earth. What do you see? You see blue ocean. You see some greenery where the land is. You see the beautiful undulating white clouds. Everything's a curve. Everything's round, right? This is making our brain happy. And the reason why is because we have something called the ancient brain, or we call it the ancient brain in gerontology. It's composed of your brainstem, your amygdala, which is where your emotions are mostly residing in your brain, and your hippocampus. And many of us who know about dementia or have a loved one with dementia, Alzheimer's, or caring for, we know about the hippocampus. That's the center for memory, also a center for learning. That's your ancient brain. Everything else, the language that we speak, the analytics and rationality and making good decisions and stuff, that's all part of the more modern brain that we now have. When we think about our modern world of technology, what we need to do is we now need to balance that technology world with our ancient brain needs, because the ancient brain is not getting what it needs. And that's why we feel stress, depression, anxiety, all kinds of other things that are happening, cascading from that. So what is this? Well, this is 2 to 3 million years ago. We lived out on the African savanna, and that's a picture here that you can see. And what do you see? Well, beautiful blue skies, and again, those gorgeous, curvy clouds. But you also see the acacia trees, and that is telling the brain, okay, so if it's too hot, I have someplace to go and sit and maybe get some shade. But also, if there's a predator in the area, I'm going to climb way up in that tree, and that's hopefully going to save me. The other thing my brain is seeing is I'm seeing some green shrubs out into the background there, but I'm also seeing kind of the yellow grassland, and that's telling my brain, haha, this is a really good place because you know what? There's a food source and a water source here. So this is good. And what we were doing as we were out on the ancient savanna trying to survive is we were using our 5 senses. And the 5 senses now become critical components of how we help with de-stressing ourselves and also tapping a little bit more into happiness. But you don't see grid lines, you don't see metal, you don't see glass, right? You don't see any of the modern stuff that we have in our world. You see pretty much just nature. So a couple things I'm going to tell you about quickly, and then I want to get to our conversation and hear what you guys have to say and also what you can share with us. But there's 2 things I'm going to take out of my book. One is blue wellness, okay? So the researchers and scientists believe that we are attracted to water and to aquatic environments because it was an endless source of fresh water. So again, it triggers the brain to go, ha, good news, we got plenty of water. We're not going to run out of water and food. This is good. That's what the ancient brain does. It's pretty simple stuff on that ancient brain. But also, this is why fish and shellfish, that we ate thousands of years ago, that contained a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, became critical for brain development. In fact, shrimp is known as one of the best brain health foods that you can eat. And of course, we always know that salmon and some other types of fish that have those omega-3s are on like a Mediterranean or a MIND diet, which is the best diet that we can follow for cognitive health and brain health. The other thing is that we know from an anxiety standpoint, more women than men tend to suffer from that generalized anxiety disorder, that GAD. So we ruminate a little bit more, we analyze things a little bit more, and this creates more of that anticipatory anxiety and stress. So one of the things is we're looking at the brain chemistry between men and women now. The hormonal fluctuations, of course, that women get through health stages like puberty or menopause. How are those affecting that anxiety, imbalance? And one of the things that we know, is that children who are as young as 9 years old, we do have what we call neuroplasticity, where we can build new neural networks. Now, in 9-year-old children, the brains are still not developed until they're about 29. But the emotional responses, negative or positive, are what we're building at that age. We now know there are stages of brain development. And a lot of stuff that we learn in our childhood, of course, gets embedded and it sticks with us through life. It's the same as kind of like muscle memory. You can build some great muscle memory as a kid and it kind of will stick with you over the course of life. And so we really need to think about, how do we retrain our brains to embrace more of that natural stuff that our ancient brain needs. That's why I go back to these scenes from the African savannah. That's what our brains are craving. That's what our kids need. That's what all of us need. We need more of that. Now, I know we all can't get on a plane and go to Africa, which would be wonderful if we could, but we need to find ways to get it in our own environments. The other thing, too, is I wanted to let you know that there was a really interesting study that was recently done that showed that people who lived near water or were able to visit at least, on a weekly basis, walk along the coastline, whatever it is, had an increase in happiness of 5%. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but any little increase we can get in our happiness, I think, is worthwhile. So when you think about your childhood, think about the things you love to do. And a lot of them do have to do with baths, or I'm sorry, with water, like taking a bath. Now, some of us hated taking a bath. Now it's like, oh my God, what a luxury a bath would be, right? Who has time to ever take a bath anymore? But, just again, doing a slip and slide. My brother and I love that in the backyard. Maybe you were a surfer or a water skier. Maybe you went to camp, or, love fishing, or you had a swimming pool, or whatever it is. It often involves water because water can bring us a lot of happiness. Now, the other side of water is that 50% of adults are dehydrated, and this affects our brain function. So we know we're not getting enough water. And there was a study that was published just a couple years ago, and it was done over a 30-year period. So it's called a longitudinal study, which means there's a lot of validity. There's a lot of credibility in those studies, particularly when it's done with a lot of people. This one had 11,000 white, Caucasian, and Black African American adults. And when they embraced proper hydration, they actually slowed the cellular aging and also improved their cognitive performance. So that was a really interesting study, totally just tied to water. Now, one of the things we know is if you're 1% dehydrated, this isn't much, you experience a 5% decline in cognitive function, and you even have some short-term memory loss. Again, it can also lead to things like headaches, like fatigue, like brain fog, other things. So you want to be really mindful of how water is really affecting your overall. It can cause anxiety and stress if we're dehydrated. We get more panicky because the fluids are not there. The functioning of the body is not correct. It's not in balance. The other thing is with our older loved ones, we know that people with Alzheimer's have balance issues already. But if they're also dehydrated, maybe they forgot to drink their water during the day, they can get dizzy, and that can lead to falls, which we know are, can be deadly for our older population. Also, if you're taking medications, you want to keep up your water intake, because the effect of that medication on your cells and in your bloodstream is helped by having more hydration in your body to absorb and properly, take in that medication. So all of these different things become really important. And there's a formula now. The National Academy of Medicine says that women should drink 91 fluid ounces a day and men should drink 125. Okay, I'm going to give you a more personalized, easy way to think about this. Take your body weight, turn it into ounces. Okay, so let's say you weigh 160. That's 160 ounces. Divide it in half. That's 80 ounces. That is what you should be drinking on a daily basis. It's a very personalized kind of way to think about staying hydrated, because we're all different, right? So you want to think about what are the ways that make it a little bit easier.
The
Oh,
past 2 nights, so
sorry,
I don't know if it's that or not.
can you mute yourself? Can you mute yourself? We're hearing a conversation in the background. Thank you. The other thing is, besides the blue wellness, there's also kind of what I call the green movement in my book, which is not about the environmental movement, although many of us are certainly environmentalists and we love all the green that's going on. But green is really interesting in our lives because it is how we become more positive. It's an optimistic color. The human eye sees about 1 million colors, so it's like a Pantone color system. And green sits right in the middle of something that we call the nano system of light. So it's nanometers that we measure how much light gets into the retina, into the eye. Green is right in the middle. So other colors on, blue, lavender, red, whatever, they're on other ends of the spectrum. Green is in the middle, which means as we age, green is the color we will see the longest, okay? Because we need 3 times more light at age 60 that we did at age 20 to read properly or see things properly. So green is going to be the color we see the longest. It is going to be, again, it's related to green meaning food source. Okay, that makes me happy. My ancient brain is jumping up and down. It's also related to things like fertility and living. So there's kind of this cultural thing that's built into green. And it is something that, is kind of shown to create optimism, particularly in older adults. It's kind of why surgeons wear a teal color of scrubs, blue or green, because the blue calms you, right? That's a calming color. The green is a vitality color and also a calming color. So together, they're kind of triggering your brain to think, okay, I'm going to make it out of this surgery. I'm going to be okay. So that's why they wear that color of scrub, just as a little detail there. Anyway, so green is something that we want to think about in terms of just, inside our homes. Are we using green? Now, there's also something called biophilic design, which is all about using nature and infusing that into the design of your home and environment. It's also called neurodesign. Again, going back to what I showed you earlier, we're looking for green. We're looking for maybe a water source we can hear or look at. We're looking for beautiful light that looks out onto nature. We're looking for maybe more of those earth tones that make us feel grounded. This is all part of biophilic design, but also curves. Okay, nothing with sharp edges, nothing with too much metal or glass. We want to get back to a little bit of that earth, because this is the most calming type of sanctuary that we can create in our homes. And in fact, there were studies that were done back in the 80s with 2 groups of patients. You may have heard of this. One group of patients who had gone through, I think it was maybe heart patients. So they'd gone through surgery. They had a room in the hospital with a view onto nature. They could see beautiful trees, shrubs and flowers, whatever it was outside their window. The other group had nothing. They could not see a view. They just had all the machinery and everything around them. The group that had the view onto nature actually were discharged twice as fast and needed half the medication, when they were rehabbing at home. Now, this study had been replicated over 25 years and has been ongoing in kind of our scientific library, if you will. So we know that nature heals. We know that it helps us in terms of our anxiety. It gets that respiration down, makes us feel a little bit calmer. Something else that we all became really, kind of became important in our lives, if you will, particularly when we were experiencing the COVID pandemic, is air care. We know that there's 40 pounds of dust and about 45 different toxins inside our homes. And very often being inside is worse than even being outside. It's why, by the way, Central Park was created, because at that time in the 1850s, people were clustered into these small little tenement apartments. They were working inside factories. They were rarely outside. So it was really a public health initiative for New York to create Central Park as a free place where anybody could go and get outside, take in the oxygen that you get from trees. And thank God for Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park, because he insisted on twice as many trees as they wanted, because he knew it was going to help with lung function, and it was also going to help with calming and feeling better and all those kinds of things. So NASA did a study a few years ago, and what they found is there are certain plants. We should have on average 5 plants in our homes. Certain plants are better than others. But it not only helps with that green optimism, vitality, calming effect, but it also can help with air care. So, a lot of kids and even people over 65 people over 65 are often wrongly diagnosed with COPD when in fact they have asthma. We also have a high level of asthma within our children's population. So if you bring in more of the houseplants and the air care, you're going to help with that. So NASA did this study. 5 plants is the prescription. And I'll just tell you really quickly here. I'm going to read this. English ivy. This actually reduces airborne mold in your house in just hours. Peace lily, areca, and bamboo palms absorb pollutants and moisturize the air to help with sinus problems. Aloe vera plants release oxygen all night and fight benzene. And spider plants absorb common indoor air pollutants like formaldehyde, benzene, xylene, and carbon monoxide. And they also, you really fight off those VOCs, those volatile organic compounds that come from plastic and other things we might have in the home. So you may want to think about bringing plants. And again, this is good for both us and our loved ones, right? So it's not just helping just ourselves. And then finally, and I'll stop talking and we'll get into our workshop part. I call it walking on sunshine, but we know that walking outside in nature, again, immerses ourselves in those 5 senses. It's better. There was a study that showed that 10 minutes walking in nature is the equivalent of 30 minutes on a treadmill inside a gym. Now, you may say, well, but my gym has a really great window. I can look outside. It's fine. Okay. But you're not hearing bird song or the leaves. You're not crunching, the leaves and different things on your walk. You're not maybe able to touch different things like twigs or flowers or whatever. All of these things are our 5 senses coming awake. And the minute that we can get away from the technology for a bit and focus on those 5 senses, that's actually a really great brain exercise for cognitive functioning, is to take 5 minutes and take 1 minute and focus on each of your 5 senses. Like look at 5 things, touch 4 things, hear 3 things, smell 2 things, and taste 1 thing. That's kind of the exercise. And it actually works out different regions of your brain, which is building what we call that neuroplasticity, because it's building those different neural connections. So those are, and also it's getting you vitamin D, which is really essential to boosting that serotonin hormone, which is our mood boosting happiness hormone that is inside our microbiome in our gut. That's where it emanates. And so being in sunshine, being outside is going to help with that. So I'm going to stop now and I'm just going to say thank you. Here are a couple things on my book. And also you can go to the Caregiving Club YouTube channel and subscribe. We've got different podcasts and newscasts and different things that we do on caregiving and all that. But I'm going to turn now because I've got 2 different screens. I want to go to our conversation and I want to open it up. If there's anyone, if you want to share your thoughts on what I've shared or something that's maybe helped you with your anxiety, I'd love to hear from you. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself, whoever wants to start. Anybody?
One thing that I've learned that helps with my anxiety or, you know, fidgetiness, which happens a lot when I'm caregiving, is to have some type of handwork that I can do, you know, connect the head and the hands so that, you know, and I've been doing it pretty much through this because I need something to do. Just sitting and listening is not productive for me because my mind will wander. If I'm doing something with my hands, then I pay better attention. So forgive me if you noticed that and thought, "What's he doing?"
No, that's totally fine. I get it.
Okay, but yes, I find that it calms me. It makes my breathing regulate, and you know, it's just a good thing to do. And plus, you end up with something when you're done.
Well, and I want to congratulate you because you brought up something I think that is important. Again, it's that tactile. That's the touch, right? That's one of the five senses. That's a really critical one. So that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that.
And you notice it's not, it's blurring. Let me it's green.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Love it. Anybody else? I'm just going to check through our chat, see if anybody's shared anything, but anybody else have any techniques or has anybody else used the Claire Weeks anxiety floating stuff? No, we don't have it. We have a lot of shy people today. Hi there.
Hi, everybody. I am Lana from Barbados, so I'm probably the only Caribbean person in this crowd, so this is great. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And I'm part-time caregiver for my grandmother who not only has dementia, stage 4 to 5 right now, but she also, in the midst of all that, had fallen, this is 2 years ago, and fractured her hip. So she's not mobile. So it's kind of like for the main caregiver, my aunt, who is there all the time, and then for us to take shifts to help her out. I find that she does puzzles, but it's on the screen. So I keep, on the phone. She loves crosswords. She's always done that. My grand has really bad sundowning, so trying what I found helps is to just rub her, touch her hands. I find that she loves music, so any kind of music that we play, or rubbing her hands, or because there are times when she talks, there's made up words. So I just, whatever. I'm like, yeah, like, the made up words, them, you're talking, rubbing her hands, which she did with us as children and growing up. And also, but for my aunt, who is, I think she's a bubble of anxiety right now. She's just, if anybody watched Inside Out 2, she's like anxiety on the panel. So to get her to, one of the things that she has actually started to try is box breathing. So I'm trying to get her to just do the deep breaths, hold, and I said, how's that going to work? We just try it for 2 minutes, to just breathe and start to calm down. But because she's always on, even though we have a paid carer, I think the fear of my grand falling again because of how it happened, there's so much, there's always guilt. Everybody got guilt. And what can you suggest? She's not going outside, so outside where she is, it's not like grassy like where I am. But besides, like, say, suggesting that she get an actual book, which I had done before, maybe I can try it again. Instead of just using the screen to do the crossword and so on, which do work. I know somebody that say that, she used to like playing cards a lot. She stopped that as well. Is there anything that anybody can suggest with someone who's like a ball of anxiety right now, just to kind of snap or make a little dent in that bubble?
I've done a lot of talking, so is there anyone that wants to share maybe something that's worked for them?
Hi there.
Hi, Courtney.
Hi, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a licensed social worker, but also my stepdad has frontal temporal. And so he's had a lot of falls himself. I'd shared in the chat about music, but I think, if she's somebody who like to use her hands in any way, keeping her, and she's mobile, having her help with things, just, keeping her busy, as long as it's safe, obviously, that can be very helpful. You know, this might sound crazy, but doing like the dishes or doing things with you just to kind of keep her, because those types of things she probably remembers doing. There's also, they call them lots of different things, but the busy blanket is another good thing, just to kind of, depending on
Yes.
where she is, in her
Mhm.
progression,
Yeah.
that's a really good thing. But honestly, doing normal things too, like dishes or just folding clothes, that kind of stuff can be really helpful just to kind of keep them busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my grand. My aunt, and my grand, if you give her anything clothy now, she did fold things,
Mhm.
but now she's not focusing on it, and so she can shred up
There
a
you go.
cloth
Yep.
in seconds. I mean, like shred it down to a thread. You give her
Um,
a
sh-
washcloth, it's like threads by the time she's done. So we
yeah.
don't do that one anymore. But for my aunt, I would say someone has suggested coloring. I'm a big coloring girl,
Mhm.
about 5 coloring books and pencils and whatever. But and so thank you for that. That's another great one that some people will do.
Yeah. But I want to applaud Courtney because you brought up something I love, which is the dishwashing, because many of us
Yeah.
have automatic dishwashers, right? But
Yep.
you're taking that nature ancient brain where it needs to go, which is getting your hands over this under the soapy
Mhm.
water. It calms you and it calms
Sensory. It's a
your loved one.
sensory
That
thing.
sensory stuff is so critical. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
So
fidget
thank you.
blanket is a great idea as well. So my mom is started to make one, where we just have the whole textures and put it on, and if she shreds it up, well, I mean, at least we tried.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I
we're
want to I want to share something that somebody put in the chat. I won't say your name because I don't know if you want it shared, but I love this. This person said, humming is really great because the vibration of the voice box stimulates the vagus nerve as well. So it really can help just doing kind of a humming along, maybe with a song or something like that. That's a great one. Thank you for sharing that.
If I can interject, sorry. One thing that we have done with mom is get something simple like wood blocks or a plastic bottle with something in it. Play the music and let her play along. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if she's in rhythm. Do not judge. Just as long as she's enjoying it, it's great.
Yeah. And I'll share something with you that is in my book, and I actually interviewed this person on my podcast. He is a gastrophysicist, which I don't know if you've heard of that, but he's from the University of Oxford. He has been doing studies around music and food for decades, and he's now working with memory care facilities. And what he's finding is that when you have hypertension, you have to reduce the sodium and salt in your diet, everything tastes really bland, right? Well, if you play baritone. So let's say Johnny Cash, Johnny Hartman, Elvis, whatever. But if you play that during while your loved one or you are eating, your food will taste 38% more savory. On the flip side, if you've got diabetes and you have to reduce the sugar in your diet, you want to play the high tinkling kind of soprano sounds, the Taylor Swifts or Mariah Carey's, whatever, and the food will taste 25% more sweet. And I thought that was fascinating. So.
awesome. Thank you, guys.
I'm just looking through our chat. Anybody else want to share any comments, any thoughts on how to help our caregivers practice self-care?
I just want to interject something that you had said, Sherry, about people living next to the ocean. So my brother lives in the north of the island, and he's a water sports instructor, and my dad was as well. So we learned how to water ski and so on. I can tell you for a fact, that even when it's stressful, even when it's slow time, my brother just there's just a vibe that you get when you go to the sea. You ground yourself in the sand and walk around and even just listen to the ocean run over you or hearing the ocean sounds. Or if you don't, or if you're not near it, having the ocean on the laptop, but it's not the same. But for sure, being in the sea, I can attest to that. I'm like, whatever you have, just can you just bottle some of your seawater and just bring it? Let me collect it and smell it all day. It's just when I get to the beach, it makes a big difference. So if you can, anybody can get to the sea or any kind of water. It is really awesome.
Well, I love that. And you were talking about it might be hard for people to obviously get to the beach or wherever. Bring it inside if you can. There's so much that can be done with aromatherapy. Maybe it's a sea salt scent or something or spray, or maybe you put a little bit of sand in a little, bowl and they can put their hands in it and feel the sand. So there's a lot of things we can do that bring that nature five senses inside too that might help. Yeah. I just also want to do a quick shout out. Again, I won't name you, but we have someone joining us who is a young caregiver, what we would probably consider a young caregiver, 31, caregiving for, I think it was her husband. But she says, just being here today, talking about it, being vulnerable, asking questions, finding community shows so much strength. I'm so glad you joined us and thank you so much for being here. And hopefully you do see that often we feel all alone as caregivers, but when we can come together and share things with each other, it's another anxiety reliever, right? That's one we didn't mention that's probably a big one.
Hi, Sherry. That was me. And I put it in the chat because I get anxiety speaking to big groups sometimes, but I know that you guys all understand that, so that's okay. I was actually a caregiver for my mother, so that's why I became a caregiver at such a young age as still a teenager. And I just wanted to shout out the younger caregivers in the group because I think it's a very anxiety inducing situation for so many. And it's especially hard because you don't have the financial stability, you don't have the support from other people going through similar situations. So it just makes everything harder. And just want to give those people recognition.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing. It's so heartfelt. And it's great to hear from you. And you're absolutely right. Very often when you are younger, your peer group is off doing, they're going to clubs, they're doing this or whatever. And it's very hard to be a caregiver and be someone who has to balance that responsibility. So we hope you find community here and through Hilarity for Charity, which does such a great group, I think, really focusing on younger caregivers and those who are taking care of parents or even grandparents. So thanks for joining.
And my name's Greg. I'm from Southern California. I just wanted to chime in. I'm a certified caregiver for my son. It should be the other way around, but it's not. He's 39 years old, and he cut down in life at 35 with several other diseases. He has myalgic encephalitis, and he has 4 different diseases. He has POTS, Ehlers-Danlos, mast cell infection, and small fiber neuropathy, amongst others. And he takes a boatload of pills. And me as a caregiver, I'm also an artist. So when I get like weirded out in that, I'll go down to my studio and throw some paint on the canvas. And that takes care of me being all, been out of shape. Because I've been doing this for 5 years now. And I will ask for help. I'm not afraid to ask for help. And I will, do exactly what's in front of me. I help them out as much as I can, but in real life, I believe that it should be turned around where he should be taking care of me. I'm 74 and he's going to be 40, but that's not the case. So I just accept the fact that this is the way it is. And I do my best as I can do, I don't know what else to do or say. Maybe that can help somebody out. but you have to take care of yourself too. You can't just, be bottled up and locked up in the house with your loved one because you'll just go nuts, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's times where I go, to lunches with the boys and that, and I have to because it's not that I don't love them and I want to get rid of them. I need a break. And I think a lot of caregivers out there, you know, they they don't feel that good about themselves, or they do feel good about themselves, but they're afraid to make that leap, you know. And if I
I
can
think
say
you're
one
so
thing,
right.
you
Yeah,
know,
and Gregory, thank you so much for really again reminding us, like Nicole, there is no one size fits all for caregiving, right? I mean,
yeah.
we walk into these caregiving roles in so many different ways for so many different people in our lives. I love the fact that you are making yourself a priority at times, maybe not all the time, but getting out to lunch with friends is so critical. Just having that social interaction where you can talk about or think about maybe something else is really critical. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have a hard time finding time, to do that, or do you have help when you are gone from your loved one?
If it's longer than, like 8 hours, if it's I'm gone for 8 hours, I needed one of his friends to come over and watch him.
Okay.
But if it's like a couple hours, 3 hours, he's fine on his own.
Okay.
You
But you've
know,
created a care circle to support you as well as your son, it sounds
yes,
like.
I did. Yeah,
Yeah. That's really
yeah,
critical. Yeah, that's
yeah.
great.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
wish I would have got here early and heard what you guys had to say, but I just got in about 15 minutes ago, so I heard the
Well,
plants.
you put an exclamation on what I said because everything you're sharing with us is great. And it's what we hope a lot of caregivers are able to get those moments, like I said, moments, minutes, or whatever they can find that give them a sense of doing something for themselves so that you have that better balance to tackle that caregiving
Well,
challenge.
thanks for
Yeah.
doing this. I really appreciate it. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, well, I appreciate doing this, and I'm so grateful to Hilarity for Charity for having me back because I learned a lot from you guys. So, as much as I feel like, okay, I'm going to share all this stuff with you, it's like I wind up learning as much as you guys. So, I appreciate the comments. Is there anything else? I know we're supposed to close off here in a minute or so. Is there anything else anyone wants to share? Or, some great tips or anything? Any last thoughts? Anyone?
I would like to echo what they said in the first session. Laugh. Find
Yes.
something to laugh about. Sorry, I'm going to start crying, but
Oh.
sorry.
I
But
think you're right. Can I tell you what I do when I kind of feel down? I
I
go to
don't feel
YouTube.
down. I'm very happy because this group is so wonderful. Sorry.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that, Jean. I go to YouTube and I watch old Johnny Carson highlights. Because he just makes me crack up. He is just so funny. So I find stuff on YouTube that gives me that bit of humor.
One of the comedians that was in the opening panel, and I cannot say her name, she's Asian. I have found her and I watch her and laugh. And when I saw she was here, it just made
That's
my
so
heart
great.
happy.
Ah, well, hopefully many of you were able to join that session. It sounds wonderful. I know that Hilarity for Charity, I'm pretty sure, is recording. I don't know if they're recording these workshops, but they're recording the sessions, and hopefully people can go watch them later on demand if they missed today. So that's just
Yes, they
one
will be
thought.
recorded, Cherry. Yes.
Yeah, so great. So that'll be wonderful. Thank you, Jasmine, for chiming in there. Any other last thoughts anyone wants to share before we close out? Thank you so much for taking time to join us.
I just want to say, as a gerontologist as well, as you are sharing, the mixing the hardest part and being in caregiving, the hardest bit is finding others around you of like minds. It's not about asking for help, but necessarily finding groupings like this or gathering ourselves together. I think it's an expression we use here in Barbados a lot. Better together. I think everybody uses that, but we kind of hear it all the time. So the more we can have like a caregivers anon or something, I don't know, in our own little community, in our own communities with maybe 2 or 3 families together and just make a circle, have a Zoom night or a meeting and so on. And then one, I find it helps you to not feel as alone.
Yes.
It's harder to find some people, the people, but just start with one. So that's one of my goals for what I do. But I found that even just with the one, they then tell somebody else, and you find you'll get a group. So and not only do you feel less alone, but you also get great ideas. Like my brother, who was a caregiver, half of the things double the things that we found out how to do with my grand. He had already done caregiving like 3 times. So he was able to say, okay, don't use this cream, use this one, or do this, or try this, or work this. So utilize our resources and spend time with each other. Because, you know, the worst part of caregiving is feeling like it's just me and this will never end.
And I think as much as our family and friends want to be supportive, sometimes they just don't completely get it. So being able to share in groups where we are all in the midst of, caregiving or whatever. And I just want to say, Jean, you expressed such a heartfelt thought, and it touches my heart to think that you got a lot out of today just by being here with others who are going through the same thing, kind of listening to some of these folks, and the humor part I'm sure was so great. So thank you for joining. And I know Hilarity for Charity does other things where they bring groups together of caregivers. So you want to definitely stay in touch with them and join those events as they do them.
I
Great.
was just putting in the chat that I found that HFC has support groups that we can join. So, yes.
Yes. And they do a lot of different things throughout the year. So it's just a wonderful community of caregivers coming together. So, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to share my slides because I know some of you asked a little bit about like plants. What are the plants again, and what do they do? I'm happy to share any of that information. I've also got a video on our YouTube channel that talks about the air care and the house plants. I can send that to you as well if you want to watch it instead of read it. But thanks everybody for joining. Hopefully you'll be able to go to the Caregiver Lounge, which I think is right after this. And I just really appreciate having you all be with us today and sharing your thoughts. Thank you.